Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review The Phantom of the Mall, Eric's Revenge. So, going into this film, I would say that I thoroughly do enjoy this film because of its, of course, being the movie we're kind of rooting for, of course, the villainous character who is to be Eric. You're kind of rooting that he is to get technically what he wants and that he's going to take out all the people who had done him wrong in his supposed past life. So, going into this movie, it's kind of a more modern take on Phantom the Opera, but this time around it's Phantom of the Mall, where we have this backstory of this character who had kind of gotten burned out of his home and left for dead, to then come back and figure out who were the people who were to have all been tied to his death and kill them off one by one, or just kill off anybody who is to basically be at this mall, because why not? So, going into this film, I actually enjoy it. Like, it's just like a modern take on an old tale. And it's not a musical thing, but it seems like there is to be consistently this one theme of a song that keeps playing either in an instrumental way or whichever one would have you. But like it keeps playing throughout the whole entire film because it's supposed to be like the love song of both Susie and the Phantom. So it's kind of interesting to kind of see how this movie plays out. There's little bits and pieces here where we have like Pauly Shore's character, who's played Buzz, who's to be this guy who puts like noses and or puts eyeballs and ears in people's ice creams for the people that he doesn't like. And so he goes like we go on and we have like guys like Peter, who is to be, of course, really wanting to solve this whole case because it's like the journalist in him that just kind of kicks in, even though he's to mostly be taking photos here. We have Peter who kind of wants to figure this out and solve this whole thing to eventually have it be for possibly to him have some story to tell. So, going into this film, like, I would say that this is a really fun movie, but where could you go out of your way to say that you could see The Phantom of the Mall, Eric's Revenge? Well, currently at the second of this recording, but I'm going to give you a free option. Just wait a second here. YouTube is to, of course, have this movie, I guess, for like $2 and change with tax. Like if you're not in America and you have a different kind of equivalent of that, like it's a very cheap film to see on YouTube. So there's one recommendation there. That's an easy and quick way about going about things. If you want a free option, you could go out of your way to the second of this recording right now to go on a thing called Google and search the word Fox HD Movies. You should be able to come up with an app that says the logo of Fox HD Movies, but the title will say something different. It'll probably say play 1080p HD whatever. And you can go and download that app, and I've been using that app fairly reliably, consistently for the longest time. You could also go on to Google Play and search the word movie apps, and there's usually an app that I've seen in Google Play, but I don't know if it's going to be on there forever, that is going to say Play HD. The logo will say Play HD. And you can download that app, and that basically is a Fox HD whatever, like, it's almost the exact same kind of app. Like it's basically like, I guess I would recommend that, but I don't even know if that's even still on that's still even on Google Play right now. So take that with a grain of salt. You can also go and Google search apps called Letter C Movies, and you can pretty much almost narrowly see almost everything through that app. So if you combine both Fox HD movies and C movies, you'll be able to see pretty much everything. Because if it's not on C movies, it's probably on the other app, and so on. Excuse me, and so forth. So my pigginess. I'm sorry. Uh, I just had a drink. I just had a slurpage of something. My apologies. Anyways, so going into this film, we have this kind of Phantom the Opera like premise where, of course, we have this guy going through and killing people into this mall. There is sometimes we do technically tie in the whole mall approach of things, but then there's also some kind of weird goofy kills, like some guy used to get killed with a snake. Weirdly, goofingly, oddly, strangely. Pushing on. Anyways, so I hope to get every bit of the spoiler part of here correct, but it kind of gets to the point in this movie where this movie kind of gets all over the place and gets fairly complicated. Like there's so many times where there's some kind of weird love making scenes where I'm like, okay, that seems to just kind of come out of nowhere. It seems to be kind of weird. It's very weird. Anyways, so I would tell people to go out of your way and find this movie. If you can go and find it in a better, cleaner variation of it, go on and ahead and go and try to find that. If you want to go and probably buy this movie somewhere because it's probably reasonably fairly cheap, you could probably go ahead and do that by all means. Because I'm sure you could probably find maybe a Blu-ray or DVD, probably a DVD version of this, probably fairly cheaply done. I would assume. So, let's go out of our way to go into this film. Let's just go into spoilers. Basically, like, there's nothing that I can really compare this to. Plus, also, I really wanted to review this film because since everybody's kind of crazily shopping right now, like, what better way to continue on with another film that is to be about people going and shopping and eventually people die at some point? So, with that said, let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about the time to spoil this movie. So, very beginning of this, we have Eric, who is to return to this mall. And he is to return to this mall to get a crossbow, to get a mask. Maybe he's going to go and find some underwear that's on sale. I don't know. So, Eric is grabbing this mannequin head for some goofy reason. And so, all of a sudden, we of course have this security guard that is making his rounds to all of a sudden realize that there's to be one thing that doesn't seem quite that mannequin-esque. And so the security guard is to go and put his flashlight to Eric to realize he's not a mannequin and be like, hey, buddy, like, take off the mask, it's not Halloween. So, like, all of a sudden, we have Eric who is to go off and stab into the security guard and kill him off. So, now we have this mall that, of course, is to have its brand new opening. And so we have it where the mayor is there and like she's going on and talking about her speech and like her talking about how this like mall is going to improve the community and so on and so forth. And like we have like the mall owner who of course to be like Harv, and we have Mayor like the mayor who's going on, and I think she's Morgan Fairchild, of course, from a lot of people who know Morgan Fairchild, of course, because she's been probably in a number of like soaps and stuff like that. So I know like the mayor actually has like a legitimate name, but I always just called her the mayor anyways. Because I kind of like I'm not gonna stroll through IMDb for this one. Like I'm just not. I'm just gonna take it easy on this one. So and plus also I'll save my phone for one day, for just this moment. So we have that the mayor is going and talking about her like tying her into how this mall is going to help her. And we also have where like the mall owner Harvest to mention how that uh no one is going to know where, or no one is going to have to question where their kids are on a Saturday night because they'll be at the mall. So like weird goofy reasoning. So you would think they would be at home, but whatever. So we had them eventually like kind of ushering in this grand opening, and so we end up having both two girls, Melody and Susie, who end up, of course, going and finding jobs. Susie is to go off and find that she's going to be a waitress at this one restaurant, and I think Melody is going to be working at some store with clothing. So we go on and have the mayor and Harv going and talking uh, in Harv's office and mentioning that, hey, like maybe someday, Harv, considering what all you're doing with this mall and how you've really turned around and and made it a real like centerpiece of this whole state. Maybe like you got something here. Maybe you'll be a politician soon. And Harv is like, yeah, I would love to. And she's like, see, you're talking like a politician already. Like I'm paraphrasing here, of course. And so the mayor is also to mention to Harv, it's like, well, yeah, and you also need to go and kind of look after that son of yours, because it seems like already he's kind of caused a ruckus. And so Harv is just like, yeah, like he's kind of a screw up, so like, yeah, I'm gonna have to go and look after him. So we have the mayor going off, and she is to uh, go and get some ice cream. And before that is to happen, we have both Susie and we have Melody going to this ice cream shop that Buzz is to own, or Buzz is to have, or Buzz is to really just work in, which is be Pauly Shore's character. And so Susie and Melody are to, of course, go on and get ice cream from Buzz, and one of them ends up finding a ear in their ice cream, and the girl's like, ew. And so Buzz is to pick it up and start eating the ear. He's like you don't get an ear, like you have to pay more for that. And he starts eating the ear. And so Melody's like, oh my god, like you're so gross. So eventually later on, when Melody is to get a free ice cream from Buzz again, she ends up finding an eye in her ice cream, and she ends up taking the eye out and chucking it out. It's like, God, like, you didn't get me this time, Buzz. You didn't get me this time. Knowing full well that he was going to put something in there. So, but he's having fun with it. So, we of course have the mayor going and finding both Susie and Melody, and they are they're of course being asked by the mayor, like, well, hey, like, what brings you both here into this mall? And so they're like, well, yeah, we just got jobs somewhere. And the mayor's like, oh my god, that's great. Like, hey, like, Peter, go and take a picture of us, because like this is really helping the community, like getting people new jobs, and it's great. It feels great. So Peter is to go on and take this picture, but weirdly he finds out that Susie is so familiar and he can't quite put his finger on it. So eventually we get to where Susie and Melody are going and shopping, and so Susie is to go and find this dress, which I think is $600. You can quote me on that. Or maybe they don't say the price at all. And so Susie, of course, is to say, like, yeah, this is a really expensive dress. I don't think I'm going to buy it. I got to save up for college. And Melody's just like, no, like, you're employed now. Like, go and wastefully spend money you don't have because you're employed now. Yeah, no. So Susie doesn't go on and buy the dress, and I think Melody ends up going off and is to go and try something on. So we end up having one security guard who, of course, is to be a perv. So this security guard is to go on and see all of these fitting rooms and to watch women undress, and is to desperately want to get a show out of all this. And so we have the mall owner, Harv, who is to go and walk through the mall and hear that there's some weird ventilation shaft problem, that he's starting to hear some banging. He's starting to hear some banging because there was a repairman who was trying to fix this fan, and this guy ends up getting a face full of fan because the Phantom goes and shoves this guy's face into the fan, killing him off. So the Harv goes and tells his security guard to check what that banging is. Maybe it's a rat, and like they want to, of course, get rid of it. I don't know why they're sending a security guard to go and do it. Like, why not have it be like the maintenance people? Like, there should probably be maintenance people randomly somewhere, right? If there's a guy that repairs things, there probably should be more maintenance people. So this security guard is to go off and is to check out what that noise is, to eventually just get freaking carted his way into these into this spot where he's to, of course, get electrified and to get killed. So like, this cart is to ram into him, and he's going to ram into this electrical thing to get fried. So we then push on and, of course, have Peter, who's going and seeing Susie. And so Peter is asking Susie, it's like, well, hey, like, why do you look so familiar to me? Like, I took your picture before with the mayor, and I'm just kind of curious of why you look so familiar to me. And he's like, oh, you were part of that fire from once before. And Susie was like, well, yeah, like, my boyfriend had burned in his home, and like, I was trying to tell people that there had been a guy that was there with this weird metal earring that had put to flame the whole entire house. And so Peter is like, ain't that right, huh? Well, Because Susie is to mention how, like, where Peter was standing was the exact spot of where Eric's house used to be. And so when we get to eventually a flashback, there'll be a lot more to be explained in the flashback. So we have Buzz that comes in and grabs Peter and is like, hey man, like, you and me, we need to talk. So Buzz weirdly is to say that he has this superpower of this, like, super hearing like power where he's to weirdly hear conversations wildly from the distance while also going and getting into conversations with other people. And so, like, we have Buzz, who is finally, out of all these movies, helping us understand why is it that Buzz could hear that whole entire conversation while also not actually being in frame. And I'm like, thank God that he had some joke to explain that, because no one else would have given a crap. And luckily, Pauly Shore, in the writing of this story, is to come up with a reason for understanding this conversation. Even if it's a joke, I don't care. At least they go on and they make some joke about it. So, but I think Buzz is to really just know that Peter is to ask about this whole thing. So, because Peter is, of course, an investigator or just a guy that wants a story out of somebody. So, Buzz is to tell Peter, hey man, like, maybe you should lay off Susie and asking her about, like, her old boyfriend, because she's still, like, trying to get over that whole situation, and maybe you shouldn't dog her about it, because, like, she'll just, like, get really, like, upset about it. And so Peter is just like, well, I don't think she really likes me anyways. And Buzz is just like, well, like, if she didn't like you, she wouldn't talk to you. So, like, you're okay. So, So now I'm trying to figure out the perfect transition here. So, we go on and we, of course, have... I know that this isn't perfectly in line. I know it, like, goes... We have a whole slew of things, and we come back around to this. So, it seems that Susie is to have these, like, weird dreams about Eric and how it's all, like, leading to that moment to where, like, they were to go off and Eric was to die. So, I know there's a bleh here that I'm going to be blowing. So, Peter is to go off with Buzz at some point in this movie, and Buzz is to supposedly have a story for Peter. And so Buzz is to take Peter into this camera room and is to have him play this certain kind of Hawaiian music. And Peter's like, man, like, how soothing is this music, right? And Peter's like, what's this story about? Is it music? And Buzz is like, no. Buzz had weirdly found, like, the weird, like, backwards records that used to say, like kill Paul or something like that. We weirdly have the music that has some hidden message in it that is to tell people to shop all the time and to, like, be nice to their like, the workers at these stores, and to buy everything, to pay as much money as they can. So we have it to where Buzz is like, hey man, like I found you a story. Like, isn't that great? And so Peter is like, no, like this isn't really all that illegal. So there's not much that I can really make out of this story. So what if he has some hidden message thing hidden in it? There's nothing I can do. And so Buzz is like, oh man, like I thought I was giving you gold here. So so we end up having, of course, Harv, who is going on and is to be getting a security guard fall through his ceiling, and the security guard is to have some message, and so Harv is to go on and call one of his old contacts to now work in this store, so that way he can uh, have this guy go and clear up this whole phantom business. And so this new security guard is to, of course, be this Christopher guy that is to be the guy with the weird, goofy earring that was to have made the fire accident happen, which we'll find out in flashbacks. So Harv is to go and talk to one of his security guards, which I think his name is called Arcada, and he is to mention how a number of security guards have gone missing. Like there have been certain ones that either Harv had mentioned, oh yeah, I fired that guy, and there was to be another security guard missing uh, where Harv was to say, "Good God, another one!" Like he took out another one, and so the security guard is like, "What do you mean by that?" And Harv is just saying, "Well, like I mean that he must have taken off to go and get another job. Like that's what I meant. Like he must have taken off. That's what I meant." So like kind of like not telling anybody what's really going on besides this Christopher guy. So we end up having Peter, who's just kind of going through the mall and mall camera footage with Buzz. And so he is to see the guy that looks fairly familiar in the camera, and he has this like slick back like hair. So for some weird goofy reason, Peter in this camera is to think that this guy has to be the guy that Susie was to have talked about. So Peter goes off to Sam Goody's, or whatever this goofy store is, and he is to go and try to take a picture of this guy. And so weirdly, Peter is to not take the conventional picture of like, hey, quickly take a picture of this guy and have to run off anyways. No, like we have Peter who weirdly looks at this like reflective surface and tries to take a picture via that. And so once Christopher is to realize that Peter has taken a picture of him somehow or another, the chase ensues through this mall, which eventually has Christopher weirdly going on and like jumping on top of this elevator that that Peter is on. And so you would think that like because Christopher goes and shows his face right through this, you would have thought Peter would have taken the picture of this guy then and there, but he didn't. So we eventually have it where Peter is to figure out a way to get away from Christopher and run off. And so eventually we have, of course, where Susie is to finish up for the day and make her way back to her car. Melody is to have parked on seemingly the other side of the parking lot. So Susie is to go into her car to find out that the dress that she had wanted was in her car. And so all of a sudden, Susie is having problems with her car starting, and so she's popping her hood trying to figure out what is going on. Weirdly, Susie is to kind of like double take herself like a lot, just kind of checking behind her, to all of a sudden to see some ninja-esh like thug of a guy going and grabbing Susie, trying to wrestle with her. And so all of a sudden the mayor is in the parking lot going and trying to rescue this masked man from Susie. And all of a sudden we have the Phantom coming out of nowhere with his crossbow and firing this crossbow into this masked assailant's chest, like kind of like right at this part here of his body, like right around his shoulder. So this guy is to go off and run off to then have the mayor just like, oh, Susie, like, hey, like, come in my car. So Susie is to run down to the mayor of what had happened. And so the mayor is just like, well, okay, like, I'm going to go and I'm going to file a report, like, the next day. But, like, hey, you go off and you sleep this off. And you can also go and file a report, too, if that's what you want to do. So we find out the very next day that that the mayor is going and telling the security guard about this story and how I guess all they need to find out is this guy had some kind of limp, I guess, and now has a shoulder wound. So if anybody kind of like, if anybody has that kind of characteristics, like go and like try to track them down. So all of a sudden we randomly have this piano man that is going and playing this this little ditty, and then he's telling everybody, okay, hey guys, like I'm going on a break. So all of a sudden this guy is going to sit down and take a crap, and so he ends up taking his blazer off to go and take a dump. And so we find out that this guy's tuxedo is to be all bloody because of his wound. So he's like, that's the guy, evidently. So we end up having the Phantom go on and go after this guy while he's taking a dump by having the snake slither into his bathroom stall to kill him. I'm like, oh my god, that's got to be a horrible way to die. So now let's push on here. So we have it where Harv is going and talking to his son. And so his son, who I believe is Justin, is wanting to borrow the car here. And Harv said, dude, no, I'm not going to give you another car. You've already totaled 2 of them of mine. And so Harv is like, well, just go and get mom's car. And Harv is like, yeah, you go and you get mom's car. Yeah, you go. You know. Go on. So this guy just continues to become such a problem that eventually we have this guy just feeling like he owns the place, and I feel like he's kind of sneaking and breaking into things and getting like certain kind of beverages and whichever. So the last straw of Justin is when he is to go off and he is to hit on this one girl who I believe is Melody, and he's like trying to hit on her, and he's basically throwing his weight around, just saying like, well, hey, you should date me because my dad owns this place, kind of thing. And so Harv is to spot this conversation that is to be had here. And so Harv is like, okay, dude, you are out of here. Like, you are banned. Like, I'm sick of your garbage. Like, you're out of here. So Justin's like, okay, Dad, because Justin before was to go and take this one beverage and is sprayed all over his father's suit. And, like, we could just tell that this guy just does not, like, nothing of authority or nothing, because, like, his dad is rich. So it's like, dude, you're just going to bail me out of whatever. So we have one thing that I guess Justin is not going to get bailed out of. And that's, of course, he is going to be killed here. So Justin is to go off and go onto his skateboard to all of a sudden be lassoed up, roped into a escalator where he is going to get choked to death and killed. So Justin horrifically is to die, and then is to get dragged his way to where all these other bodies are, I'm sure, to be hidden away from. So when Peter is to go and find a photo of Christopher, after he gets away from Christopher by going and taking a photo with the mayor, with some people, which has Christopher run off. That's how he gets away. Like, I just had to take a moment to reassess how he gets away from Christopher. Peter is to go and ask Buzz where exactly Susie is working, and so Buzz points him to where she is, and he's like, okay, great. So Susie is to go on in her restaurant and is to program some jukebox, and the song that is to come up is both Susie and Eric's favorite song. It's their couple song. We also had at some point where Susie was to, I guess, open up her locker, I think, from her job, to eventually find there was her favorite flowers in this locker. And then she was like, oh my God, like somebody gave me my favorite flowers. It must be some secret admirer. Ooh, wow. So Peter is to come to Susie and tell her, hey, like, I have like a photo of the guy in my camera, and like, I'm gonna get it developed and I'll show it to you. Like, if this was like 2021, like, we would have had this guy like taking this photo with his cell phone and showed this to her and realized that it wasn't the right photo. Or this guy would have had a digital camera, and like, he would have like had the photo already there, and obviously it's like, oh well, that's the wrong camera, that's the wrong photo. So, but it just conveniently gets our characters to have to go and have Peter kind of ask Susie out to go to this place to kind of show her this photo. So Peter eventually gives her this photo when they're out together, and he realizes that it's a horrible photo, and he's like, but I think that's the guy. Like, I think the guy that I saw is the actual guy. And so Susie's like, so you believe me, right? And so Peter is to eventually go on and just like, you know what, I think I'm coming up with all the pieces. I think I'm putting all the pieces together. But I really think the next thing that we need to do is really figure out whether Eric is still like alive or not. Like, we need to go to his grave and find out if he's really dead. If he is dead, then the case is cold, that we're just like, somebody else is just randomly killing people. But if Eric is still alive, then like, we can like figure this all out now. Because Susie is getting too many coincidences that are telling her that Eric is weirdly either still alive or some kind of something. So while Peter and Susie are to go off to dig up Eric, they eventually end up finding out that, surefire enough, that Eric is still alive. And so they're like, yep, like he's got to be doing this. So Peter is to now want to know the story that Susie has about how Eric had died the night that he died. That story. So Susie is like, well, it's too painful to tell you, but Peter is like, I need to know the story. I need to know how this all played out. So Susie is to go with Eric to go to his home, where she ends up finding out that supposedly these developers have been dogging Peter for a while and have just been annoying him with wanting to, I guess, sell off his home. So Peter is to go into his house and is to have him and Susie be in the throes of passion. And so all of a sudden, we have it where they figure out that this house is now on fire, and so Eric is going and taking Susie and hanging her off to the side of this window to have her jump out of this house, so that way she can, like, survive this house burning down. All of a sudden, Eric is stuck in the home, like having this house being set on fire, and Susie has now flung her way onto the ground and had really hurt her head. All of a sudden, she ends up seeing some shadowy figure in the darkness, and I guess it's to supposedly be Christopher, who is to start pouring gasoline on this girl, and he is to all of a sudden hear, I guess, the police or firefighters or something are coming, so he runs away. So after Susie's to finish up this story, that's all of a sudden when Christopher is to have a gun to Peter and tell them, and Christopher tells them to get out of the car. Susie is trying to protect Peter, but eventually, like, we have Christopher's like, hey, like, we're old friends, like, I've seen you before. So all of a sudden, Peter is to get out his camera and blind Christopher, and so they end up getting back into their car. And so Christopher and some other security guard are trying to box them in. And so Peter and Susie eventually drive away trying to get out of this. And the Phantom ends up appearing and going and trying to break the windshield of this car. And eventually this car of Christopher starts swerving out of control and eventually turns into a car accident where conveniently the Phantom gets out of the way in perfect timing. And so both Peter and Susie are now driving off to the mayor's house to explain all this and to tell them, like, yeah, like, this is all what's happened, this is all the proof. And the mayor is like, well, okay, like, I think we have some something here. So we end up having, of course, where like, Peter is taking Susie off to her home to get some rest. And so Susie is having a dream where she is going and making sweet love with Eric. But then all of a sudden she's to see Peter instead. But then all of a sudden she ends up seeing Christopher. And that's when Susie wakes up in a night of terror. So all of a sudden the very next day, we end up finding out that Eric, who is the Phantom, is to start to put together bombs. and start to place them all over the mall to, I guess, soon celebrate his anniversary of him getting killed off in his story. But he had never really died. So, spoilers, it's spoiler time. So, we have Susie, who is a waiter at some restaurant, that all of a sudden she is to go on and see Christopher kind of being at one of her tables, so Susie is to drop everything and run off. So Susie is to go and call Peter and say, "Oh my God, Christopher, Peter is here," or what did I say there? Blah, 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 blah. Let's rewind. Susie is calling Peter to tell her that, or tell him that Christopher is there and like for him to help her. So what ends up happening is that Christopher is to chase after Susie. So all of a sudden we end up at this kind of like this back room like place of this mall where all of a sudden we have Buzz, who's running to get Melody to have them need to go to this camera room to figure out where Susie is in this mall and how they can possibly tell Peter where exactly she is at some point and kind of figure things out. So, but Buzz has to figure out a way to try and get this security guard to leave this security room. So Buzz is going off to like lift up his shirt and twist his nipples and to drop trow and to show his butt into camera, and he walks away from it. And so the camera the security guard that's watching this camera is going and trying to find where Buzz is, and so both of them go into the camera room and they start looking for where Susie is. And because like Peter is to also tell Buzz that when they meet up that there's bombs in this building, because Eric will explain that to Susie at some point. So Christopher is to chase after Susie, and the Phantom is to rescue Susie from Christopher. So the Phantom and Christopher are fighting, and we end up having at one point where like the Phantom is like practicing all of his karate moves, and so it's like he's like Mortal Kombating it. Freaking, he's getting ready. I'm like, when did this guy have all this like martial arts karate skill? Like, I guess from all this time of him just like waiting it out, maybe he took some Tai Bo like tapes from some store somewhere, and maybe he learned karate from somewhere. I don't know. I don't even know what Tai Bo is. Is that karate? I don't even know. It's been a while. So, anyways, we end up having both Christopher and Phantom fighting it out, and it seems like the Phantom has met his match, and so we have it where it seems like someone's head is going to get crushed in some cardboard compactor thing, where eventually, like, I'm assuming that this is kind of a thing that eventually gets baled out in cardboard bales and pallets and all that kind of rigmarole. So we have it where the Phantom is going to be close to seemingly be crushed by this compactor, but we eventually have it where the Phantom is to push this thing to not have it exactly be closed. And so eventually the Phantom is putting, of course, this other guy's head underneath this thing to eventually get crushed, and his head ends up getting chopped off. So the Phantom is to go and grab Susie and now take her to his lair, where now he's going to be pumping some iron with some kind of weights of sorts. I don't remember what this machine was actually called, but it looks like some kind of like triangle thing that you have to like kind of push. Like it's been a while since I've actually had to use that kind of machine. I've used it before when I've been into a gym, but heaven forbid I actually know what it's called. Like a lot of times I would see it like if you ever see like those like Bowflex commercials, like usually it's a lot of like that kind of stuff that ends up going like it's kind of like with a Bowflex, it kind of looks like one of those kinds of like goofy machines where you kind of have to like pull and there should be this like long weird curved bar with this string there. Like I think I've explained it kind of good enough for people to understand what this is. So this guy is pumping it. He's really just pumping the jam. Pump it up, dude. Pump it. I'm having fun. So Eric is going and lifting and getting some sweet gains. And so Susie's like, sweet gains. Susie goes over there. I spent too long trying to make a joke out of that. So Susie goes over there and she is to just be like, Eric, is that you? Kind of thing. And so Eric is to quickly unmask and show her his deformed face. But then he weirdly has to kind of cover his face also. Just be like, wait a minute, whoa. Like, you shouldn't see me like this. No, I'm scarred forever. I'm not the person that you loved. Hoo-hoo-hoo. So Susie and Eric are talking, and so eventually how this is to play out is that we have Eric who thinks that he can kind of buy Susie's love by giving her a dress to say like, hey, try this on, like it's your favorite color. And so he is to eventually just tell Eric, like, well, Eric, like, a lot of time has passed, like, between you and I think I found someone else. And Eric's like, no, like, you're only doing this because of how I look now. You're only saying this because of how I look. So, like, that kind of thing. And so, we end up having, like, Eric who's going to hurt Susie, and he's like, well, like, now tonight I'm gonna get my revenge because I'm gonna blow up this whole building. I'm gonna blow up this whole building with bombs and blah, blah, blah. So Peter eventually comes to Susie's rescue, and so we now have it where obviously Eric hasn't really met his match with Peter. Peter's kind of getting decked a little bit, but eventually Peter figures out some way to eventually get away from the Phantom. So we end up going on and having it where there is to be this whole kind of party going on because of this mall, and like it seems like a party, like it seems like a charity auction kind of party kind of deal, kind of, you know what, having a good time. So we eventually have both Peter and Susie eventually getting the mayor and separating her from this party. And so now they're trying to talk to her. And so the mayor is eventually going to tell them that she's actually in cahoots with this mall owner and that she has been working with him this whole time, getting bribes and all kinds of things. And so the Phantom is to eventually go on and show up and go and take the mayor and chuck her through this window and to have her fall onto this table where she is to get spiked by something and killed. So all of a sudden everybody's like, whoa, that's pretty awful. So now we end up having it to where Susie and Peter are trying to run away from this phantom by weirdly taking these metal beams or whatever that are on the top of this mall, and they're trying to climb away from the phantom. And so at one point we end up having Susie and Peter getting pretty good distance away from the Phantom, and we have Susie at one point going and ripping a part of this sign that is to be on one of the bottoms of, or one of the bottom parts of this kind of beam things that are on the top of this building, whichever. So at one point, we end up having the security guard who is going and shooting Eric and shoots him in the chest. So we end up having everybody kind of scattering around. And so Harv ends up going on, and he's standing in front of this one store. And so it seems, since Eric is to realize that Harv is the only one really left to get to, we now have it where Eric is to go and grab onto this sign and is to basically use this sign like some kind of rope as it tears to go and swing his way into the mayor, or the mall owner, smashing his way into this one store. And so, of course, we end up having the villain who is the desperately grovel moment where he is like, oh, please, oh, don't hurt me, kind of thing. And so we end up having it to where Harv is trying to make up all these offers where he's like, hey, man, like, I can get you, like, all kinds of surgery. I can have you, like, I can have anything happen for you. Like, it'll all work out. I can have you eat and drink anything and whatever. And so Eric is of course saying in plight of like, well, how about you go and eat this? So coincidentally, they all of a sudden have a flamethrower just weirdly on standby, because I'm like, I'm sorry, there is no way in heck that there's going to be a flamethrower that works in a mall. That seems way too far-fetched. If anything, like, there wouldn't probably even be a display of this thing even actually working anywhere. Like, I've had it where there's been some tools and stuff, like drills and stuff, that are operational, but there's never that thing that would lead to be such a dangerous... There is no way you would have that. Like, there is, like, propane, like, tanks are to be in this, like, locked up, like cage thing that's outside of the building. And, like, there is no way that there would be a propane tank inside a store unless it's one that is obviously completely empty. Then maybe that one would be there, not one that would be filled with propane. But a lot of people would contradict me and say, like, oh yeah, like, I have a certain store that blah, blah, blah. Then I'd be like, wow, okay, that's wildly dangerous. But it's just to do this for an ending here, to be like a ooh, wow kind of thing. So Eric is to go on and flamethrower the mayor, and that explosion is to cause Eric to now have to go and try to quickly evacuate this place, this store that he's in, while he's on fire. And so Eric just decides to just jump off of the side of this thing to eventually just fall to his supposed death. So now we have, of course, Buzz, who is calling everybody to leave this building quickly and evacuate it, because there's a bomb that's going to go off soon because of there's a bomb threat happening, so everybody leave and evacuate this building as quickly as possible, and Buzz is making that call. So he's paged this over the overhead numerous times, and then he is to go with a motorcycle through this mall to then take Peter and Susie to make their way out of this building before the mall, of course, is to explode. So the mall eventually does explode, and so we wrap up this with basically Peter, I'm assuming at this point, like, man, this is going to be one heck of a story. So really, at the end of this, I'm sure Peter is going to make a big, huge chunk of change out of this whole thing, this whole ordeal. So really, at the end of this movie, like, basically everyone is to get the heck out of there. Both Peter and Susie are to cement their love for one another, and this movie is to wrap up. So with that said, I think we'll get out of here. Man, I was lucky to hope that I got most of this right. I hope that I did. If there's any part that I forgot about, if there's any part that I didn't mention, oh well. Like, this one was like, man, how, like, hard is this movie? Because there's so little small little details, especially there's these, like, rando scenes that don't quite make sense. And there was also, like, a way originally that I wanted to do this, was do the whole, like, origin story of how that whole fire happened before all this, but I'm just like, no, I'll just do it the way the movie does. And so with that said, this movie does kind of remind me of, like, of Silent Night, Deadly Night, like the very